When rescue diver Ethan Carter saw the first gold coin glitter beneath 300 feet of seawater, he thought every problem in his life had just disappeared. His daughter's life, his crushing debts, the hospital bills, everything. By sunset, he believed he had become the luckiest man alive. By midnight, he wished he had never found the ship, because hidden inside the captain's cabin was a handwritten confession. One sentence, written more than 300 years ago. A sentence that turned millions of dollars into a burden no father should ever have to carry. If Ethan kept the treasure, his daughter would live. If he returned it, thousands of strangers would finally receive justice. But his little girl probably wouldn't survive long enough to see it. So what would you choose? Every morning began the same way. The alarm rang at 5. Ethan quietly slipped out of bed so he wouldn't wake his daughter. 8-year-old Lily had spent more time inside hospitals than playgrounds. She suffered from a rare neurological disease that slowly robbed her muscles of strength. Doctors had tried everything. Nothing worked. Then, 3 weeks earlier, a specialist delivered one last piece of hope. An experimental treatment overseas. The success rate wasn't guaranteed. But without it, Lily had less than a year. The price was impossible. Nearly $2 million. Insurance refused to pay for an experimental procedure. The hospital couldn't help. Charities had already contributed all they could. Ethan sold his truck, his fishing boat, even the house his father built. Still, he wasn't even close. Each night Lily smiled and asked the same innocent question. Dad, when I get better, can we finally go snorkeling together? Every time, he forced himself to smile. Of course. Then he'd walk into the hallway and cry where she couldn't see him. Ethan had spent 20 years working as a commercial guide crew. Most jobs were dangerous, repairing underwater pipelines, recovering wreckage, searching for lives after storms. But Lily worked almost disappeared. The only call he received that week came from a marine research company. They weren't looking for treasure. They were mapping unusual sonar beams 20 miles offshore. The pay wasn't great, but Ethan couldn't afford to sit down. The research vessel left before dawn. By afternoon, the sonar operator frowned at the screen. There, a strange outline rested on the ocean floor. Too symmetrical to be rock, too large to be coral. The captain ordered a camera drone to launch. Minutes later, everyone aboard fell silent. The drone's lights revealed weather with moons, broken canyons, and what looked unmistakably like the remains of an 18th century sailing ship. The company celebrated. A historic discovery meant fainted. Scientific papers, government funding. No one even mentioned treasure. Not yet. The next morning, Ethan descended alone, 300 feet beneath the surface. The world became silent. His flashlight swept across shattered barrels, collapsed masts, and coral-covered canyons. Then something flashed. Just for a second. At first, he thought it was a fish. He brushed away centuries of sand. A gold coin appeared. Then another. Then dozens. His breathing grew faster inside his helmet. One broken chest had spilled hundreds of coins across the seabed. Nearby, 3 more chests remained sealed. His pulse pounded. Even through years of corrosion, the decorative carvings looked untouched. He carefully opened one. It was overflowing. Gold coins, silver ingots, emerald necklaces, pearls, jewelry crafted by hands, long turned to dust. Even Ethan knew what he was looking at. This wasn't thousands of dollars. This was hundreds of millions. Maybe more. His daughter's treatment was no longer impossible. It was sitting right in front of him. He smiled for the first time in months. Then he noticed something strange. The captain's cabin remained almost perfectly preserved beneath layers of sediment. And inside the cabin, resting on a wooden desk, was a small iron box, still sealed, still intact. Ethan reached toward it. He had no idea that opening that box would become the hardest decision of his entire life. Ethan carefully lifted the small iron box from the captain's desk. 3 centuries underwater should have destroyed everything inside, yet the thick iron walls and wax seals had done their job. The box was surprisingly heavy. He clipped it to his gear and slowly began his ascent. The entire way back to the surface, his mind raced. He wasn't thinking about history. He wasn't thinking about museums. He was thinking about Lily. For the first time in months, he could imagine hearing a doctor say those words every parent longs for. "Your daughter is going to be okay." The research vessel exploded with excitement when Ethan showed them the gold coin. Within hours, the government declared the wreck a protected archaeological site. News helicopters circled overhead. Historians arrived before sunset. Security boats surrounded the area. Everyone talked about the ship. No one knew about the iron box. Ethan kept that to himself. That evening, a conservation expert carefully opened it in front of him. Inside were several personal belongings: a rusted compass, a silver pocket watch, a faded family portrait, and a leather-bound logbook wrapped in layers of oilcloth. The pages were yellow with age, but almost perfectly readable. On the first page, written in elegant handwriting, were the words, "Captain Elias Hawthorne, June 17th, 1726. The expert smiled. This could rewrite maritime history. Ethan wasn't interested in history. He flipped toward the final pages. People often wrote the truth when they believed they were about to die. He was right. The handwriting became shaky. Ink stains covered parts of the page. Several sentences had been crossed out. Then Ethan found the final entry. He read slowly. "The sea has become our judge. We do not deserve salvation. The treasure below our feet was never ours." Ethan frowned. He kept reading. "We were ordered to seize gold collected by the crown. Instead, greed overcame every man aboard. We raided the fishing village of San Aurelio. The villagers begged us to leave enough food and coin for winter. We laughed. We took everything." Ethan swallowed hard. The confession continued. Children cried as their parents watched generations of savings disappear. Some fought back. Several died. The rest watched our ship disappear over the horizon. His hands began to shake. This wasn't pirate treasure. It wasn't abandoned wealth. It had belonged to innocent families. The captain's final words struck him harder than anything before. "If God sends another soul to this wreck, let him return what we stole. Only then may our sins finally sink beneath the waves." The room fell silent. Even the conservation experts stopped speaking. No one knew what to say. The next morning, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about the confession. Something about the village's name stayed with him. San Aurelio. He searched old maritime records at the local archive. To his surprise, the village still existed. It sat barely 30 miles south of the wreck. Curious, Ethan drove there. The place looked forgotten. Small wooden homes leaned from years of storms. Fishing nets were patched together again and again because no one could afford new ones. Children played barefoot on broken docks. Many of the boats were older than the men sailing them. An elderly fisherman noticed Ethan looking around. "First time here?" Ethan nodded. The old man smiled politely. "We don't get many visitors." Ethan asked carefully, "Has this town always struggled?" The fisherman looked toward the sea. "My grandfather told me a story. His grandfather heard it from his own grandfather. 300 years ago, a royal ship stole everything this village owned. Our people never recovered." Ethan felt his stomach tighten. The old man laughed softly. "Of course, it's probably just an old legend." But Ethan knew it wasn't. Not anymore. A week later, government officials announced preliminary estimates. The treasure could be worth over $300 million. Television crews called it the greatest underwater discovery of the century. Lawyers quickly became involved. Because Ethan had made the initial discovery under a legal research contract, maritime law entitled him to a substantial finder's award if ownership couldn't be proven. Experts believed that award alone could exceed $20 million. $20 million. Enough to pay for Lily's treatment. Enough to buy a home. Enough to make sure she would never struggle again. His phone rang. It was Lily. "Dad, did your diving trip go okay?" Ethan smiled despite the weight on his chest. "It went better than expected." She giggled. "When I get stronger, will you teach me to dive?" He closed his eyes. "You'll be the best diver in the ocean." After the call ended, he stared at the captain's confession again. $20 million, or 300 years of justice, for the first time in his life. Ethan wished he had never found that ship. And then things became even worse. Because the next morning, someone offered him a deal that would make the decision almost impossible. 3 days after the discovery, Ethan received a phone call from an unknown number. "Mr. Carter?" "Yes. My name is Victor Lang. I represent Atlantic Recovery International." Ethan had heard of them. They were one of the world's largest marine salvage companies. Victor's voice remained calm. "We'd like to discuss the ship. I don't own the ship." "No," Victor replied, "but you own something far more valuable." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "The captain's journal." Silence. No one outside the research team was supposed to know about the confession. "How do you know about that?" Victor ignored the question. "Meet me tonight." At exactly 8 o'clock, Ethan walked into a quiet waterfront restaurant. Victor Lang was already waiting. Perfect suit, expensive watch, a smile that never reached his eyes. He slid a folder across the table. Inside was a contract. Then he placed another sheet of paper beside it, a bank statement. The number at the bottom made Ethan freeze. $25 million. $25 million. Victor leaned forward. "That's yours." Ethan looked up. "For what?" Victor smiled. "You simply forget the journal exists." Victor calmly sipped his coffee. The world loves treasure stories. It hates complicated ones. If the journal disappears, everyone wins. The government keeps the artifacts. Our company receives the recovery contract. You receive $25 million. And your daughter gets the treatment she desperately needs. Ethan felt his stomach turn. Victor knew about Lily. He knew everything. Ethan slowly asked, "And the village?" Victor shrugged. "What village? A 300-year-old tragedy won't change anyone's life today. The people living there aren't the same people who were robbed. They're strangers. But your daughter isn't." Victor leaned closer. "You have a responsibility to your family, not to history." For several seconds, neither man spoke. Then Victor delivered the sentence Ethan couldn't stop hearing. "If Lily dies because you chose strangers over her, will you ever forgive yourself?" That night, Ethan rushed to the hospital. Lily had collapsed during physical therapy. Doctors stabilized her. But the disease was progressing faster than expected. The specialist met Ethan outside her room. "We've moved the surgery date forward. How long do we have?" The doctor hesitated. "Maybe 6 weeks. Possibly less." The hallway seemed to spin around him. 6 weeks. That was all. He looked through the glass window. Lily was asleep. A stuffed sea turtle rested beside her pillow. When she noticed Ethan standing there, she smiled weakly. "Dad, you look sad." He forced another smile. "I'm just tired." She reached into her blanket and pulled out a folded drawing. "I made this." It showed the two of them underwater. Bright coral. Friendly dolphins. Sunlight shining through blue water. At the bottom she had written, "My first dive with Dad." Ethan's eyes filled with tears. She still believed that day would come. Unable to sleep, Ethan drove to the small lighthouse where his late father had once worked. As a child, he used to sit there listening to old sea stories. One memory suddenly returned. His father had once said, Son, the ocean gives people two kinds of treasure: the treasure you can spend and the treasure you can live with. I've seen men become rich overnight, but I've never seen a guilty man sleep peacefully. At the time, Ethan thought it was just another old sailor's saying. Now, those words felt painfully real. The next day, Ethan returned to San Aurelio. This time, he wandered farther into the village. He found a tiny school. Rain leaked through the roof. Children shared torn textbooks. Outside, volunteers were repairing broken fishing nets because the families couldn't afford new ones. A little girl, about Lily's age, waved at him. "Are you from the city?" Ethan nodded. She smiled. "My teacher says someday tourists will come here. Then maybe we'll have a real hospital. What would you do if you had lots of money?" She didn't hesitate. "I'd buy medicine for my grandma and shoes for my little brother." She looked down at her bare feet and laughed. "It would be nice not to step on shells." Ethan couldn't answer. All he could think about was Lily. Same age. Same innocent dreams. One child needed a surgery. Another simply wanted shoes. Neither had done anything wrong. Yet both were paying the price for decisions made by adults. 300 years apart. That evening, Ethan sat alone in his apartment. The contract lay on one side of the table, the captain's journal on the other. $25 million. Or the truth. His phone buzzed. A message from Victor. Midnight. That's when the offer expires. At exactly 11:58 p.m., Ethan picked up his pen. He opened the contract, signed his name, and then stopped. His hand froze. His eyes drifted toward Lily's drawing, taped to the refrigerator. She had written one sentence beneath the picture. "Dad says heroes always do the right thing." The pen slipped from his fingers. He stared at those words for what felt like forever. Then, someone knocked on his apartment door. 3 slow knocks. When Ethan opened it, there was no one outside. Only a small waterproof envelope lying on the floor. Inside was a single photograph. A recent photograph. It showed Lily leaving the hospital that very afternoon. On the back, someone had written just 6 words. "Choose carefully. We're watching her." Ethan's blood ran cold. This was no longer just a moral choice. Someone was willing to threaten his daughter to keep the truth buried. And he suddenly realized the greatest danger wasn't at the bottom of the ocean. It had followed him home. Ethan didn't sleep. He sat at his kitchen table until sunrise. On one side lay the captain's journal. On the other, Lily's medical file. Every few minutes he picked up one, then the other. Neither felt heavier. Both carried lives. Around noon, he drove back to the hospital. Lily was sitting by the window, watching birds outside. When she saw him, she smiled. "Dad, when we go diving one day, will fish be scared of me?" He laughed softly. "No, they'll probably think you're one of them," she giggled. Then she became unusually quiet. "Dad, are we poor?" The question caught him off guard. "Why would you ask that?" She looked down. "I heard the nurses talking. They said my treatment costs more money than most people make in their whole lives." She looked into his eyes. "You don't have to be scared. I don't want you to do something bad because of me." Ethan couldn't speak. He simply hugged her. For the first time, it felt as though his 8-year-old daughter was comforting him. 3 days later, reporters from around the world gathered at the Maritime Museum. Experts were ready to announce the discovery of the century. Television cameras rolled. Government officials smiled. Historians celebrated. When Ethan stepped onto the stage, everyone expected him to talk about treasure. Instead, he placed the captain's journal on the podium. The room became silent. He slowly opened the final pages. Then he read the captain's confession aloud. Every word, every crime, every regret. When he finished, not a single camera stopped recording. Ethan looked at the audience. "This treasure doesn't belong to me. It doesn't belong to a museum. It doesn't belong to any corporation. It belongs to the people it was stolen from." The room erupted into questions. Are you giving up millions of dollars? What about your daughter's treatment? Were you pressured into this decision? Ethan answered only once. If my daughter lives because another family's suffering is ignored, what lesson have I really taught her? The story spread across the world within hours. People weren't talking about the treasure, they were talking about Ethan. About a father who walked away from unimaginable wealth to do what he believed was right. News channels replayed his speech. Social media exploded. Millions watched. Millions shared. Then something remarkable happened. A children's hospital posted a short message. No parent should have to choose between their child and their conscience. Within minutes, donations began arriving. $100, $50, $5. Thousands of strangers gave whatever they could, then businesses joined. Professional divers organized charity expeditions, schools held fundraising events. An anonymous philanthropist matched every donation. The amount grew faster than anyone expected. By the end of the week, Lily's treatment had been fully funded. Not by stolen gold, but by people who believed kindness deserved to be rewarded. Months later, the government completed its investigation. The treasure was officially recognized as having been taken from the people of San Aurelio. Most of the historic artifacts went to national museums, but the financial value recovered from the treasure was placed into a permanent community trust. The village finally received what had been denied for centuries: a modern fishing harbor, a new school, a medical clinic, scholarships for local children, clean drinking water. The old fishermen stood on the shoreline watching construction begin. Many wiped away tears. One elderly man quietly whispered, "Our ancestors never stopped hoping." 1 year later, Lily stood on the deck of a small dive boat. Healthy, smiling, her dive mask sat on her forehead. Ethan adjusted her oxygen tank one last time. Nervous? A little? Good. That means you'll respect the ocean. They slipped beneath the surface together. Sunlight danced across the water. Schools of colorful fish surrounded them. Lily pointed excitedly at a sea turtle gliding past. Then she squeezed Ethan's hand. When they surfaced a few minutes later, she laughed so hard she could barely speak. "You kept your promise, Dad." Ethan looked across the endless blue horizon. Some treasures glitter beneath the sea. Others can't be measured in gold. 300 years earlier, one captain had filled an ocean with guilt. One father's decision had finally brought it to shore. And Ethan realized something as he watched his daughter smile. The greatest inheritance we leave our children isn't money. It's the example we set when no choice is easy.